On August 31st, 1988, it began like any other morning at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, one of the busiest in the United States. On the runway, flights take off and land without incident. Everything seems to proceed normally. At the boarding gate, 101 passengers wait to board Delta Flight 1141 bound for Salt Lake City, Utah. It is a short flight, just over 2 hours. Nothing out of the ordinary. The aircraft assigned to the service is a Boeing 727-232, a reliable triage that has been a key part of Delta's fleet since the 1970s. Although it is not the most modern plane, it remains one of the most used for domestic routes. The crew is composed of 3 pilots in the cockpit and 4 flight attendants. The captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer have thousands of hours of experience. But today, experience will not be enough. At 8:30 in the morning, boarding is complete. The flight is authorized to begin taxiing to runway 18 left. As the plane moves, the cockpit fills with irrelevant conversations. They talk about politics, personal relationships, the union. They speak in a relaxed tone, almost as if they were not about to take off. The flight engineer goes through the checklist, but without stopping, without confirming actions with the rest of the crew. No one physically checks the position of the flaps. No one questions anything. The list is completed, but not verified. What follows is a chain of errors that will cost lives. At 8:59 a.m., the control tower gives the final clearance. Delta 1141 cleared for takeoff. The first officer takes the controls and pushes the throttles forward. The Pratt & Whitney engines roar as the plane begins to accelerate rapidly down the runway. The aircraft reaches rotation speed. The first officer pulls back on the control. The nose rises. But the plane does not respond as it should. It does not gain altitude. It barely lifts a few meters off the ground. From the tower, controllers watch with concern as the plane seems heavy, unstable. This is not normal. The Boeing 727 struggles to stay in the air, but something is wrong. Moments later, the right wing strikes an approach system antenna. The impact ruptures the fuel tank and causes an explosion. The plane violently turns to the right, loses lift, and crashes. In just seconds, Delta 1141 becomes a fireball at the end of the runway. The Boeing 727 crashes barely 1,000 meters after takeoff. The impact is brutal. The landing gear collapses, the fuselage breaks apart, and the engines tear up chunks of earth as the plane slides at high speed across the grass. A dense cloud of black smoke rises from the crash site. Flames quickly begin to consume the right wing, where the fuel was concentrated. The fire spreads violently toward the central fuselage. The chaos inside the plane is absolute. Passengers scream, search for exits. Many with burns are trapped between deformed seats. Others are unconscious. Some try to free their companions. The flight attendants, injured, try to open the emergency exits as the fire approaches. Every second is vital. Despite everything, emergency teams arrive quickly. Doors are forced open. Some people manage to escape through the smoke. Firefighters fight to contain the flames, but the fire has already consumed much of the structure. By the time they manage to extinguish it, it is too late for many. In total, 14 people die, 12 passengers and 2 crew members. Another 94 survive, although many with serious injuries, burns, and psychological trauma. The accident shocks the country. How is it possible that a modern plane, under apparently normal conditions, crashes seconds after takeoff? The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, opens an immediate investigation. The first thing they analyze are the black boxes. The flight data recorder, FDR, and the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, reveal key details. The plane never had enough lift. The angle of attack was correct, the power as well. But something essential was missing. The flaps were fully retracted. On a Boeing 727, the flaps are vital for generating the necessary lift during takeoff. Their function is to change the shape of the wing, increasing its ability to lift at low speeds. If they are not extended, the plane needs much more speed and runway to fly. Delta 1141 never had that chance. Why didn't the pilots extend them? The voice recorder reveals conversations unrelated to the flight during taxiing. The atmosphere in the cockpit was relaxed, distracted. They talked about everything, except the plane. The checklist was mentioned superficially but never verified step by step. The safety culture had been replaced by routine. The NTSB also discovered that the takeoff configuration warning system, designed precisely to alert the crew if something critical, like the flaps is not in position, did not work. No alarm sounded. There was no warning whatsoever. Upon inspecting the system, they found corroded electrical contacts. The mechanism had not been properly inspected, and it wasn't the first time it had malfunctioned. Maintenance had overlooked clear warning signs. Everything begins to fit. The lack of focus in the cockpit, the omission of the flaps, the silence of the warning system, and a plane that should never have taken off. The most chilling part is that it could all have been prevented. The failures were not unforeseeable technical issues. There was no bad weather, no sabotage. The accident was a direct consequence of negligence, the relaxation of standards, and an environment where procedures were taken lightly. And this time, the price was the lives of 14 people. When the National Transportation Safety Board released its final report, the conclusion was clear. The Delta 1141 accident was avoidable. It was not an unpredictable technical failure, extreme weather conditions, or an isolated error. It was the result of a chain of human omissions, tolerated by a culture that had relaxed its operational discipline. The report explicitly mentions the informal atmosphere in the cockpit. During the 15 minutes before takeoff, the crew maintained an extended and irrelevant conversation, violating the sterile cockpit rule, which prohibits any non-flight related talk during critical phases such as taxiing, takeoff, and landing. Moreover, it became clear that the takeoff checklist was not properly executed. The flight engineer read it without active participation from the captain or first officer. No one responded to each item as the procedure requires. No one physically checked the flap indicators. No one noticed they were fully retracted. To make matters worse, the warning system, which should have detected and alerted the crew to this incorrect configuration, was malfunctioning. The alarm never sounded. No one knew something critical was missing, and Delta had no records of having properly inspected this system during previous maintenance. It was a silent failure, waiting for the exact moment to turn into tragedy. The NTSB report did not only blame the pilots but also the airline. It harshly criticized Delta's internal protocols, pointing out a lack of proper supervision, excessive tolerance for negligent behavior in the cockpit, and deficiencies in maintenance oversight. The accident forced a profound change in the industry. The sterile cockpit rule was strictly enforced across all U.S. airlines. Takeoff configuration warning systems were reviewed on thousands of aircraft. More rigorous crew resource management (CRM) programs were implemented, emphasizing communication, discipline, and effective cooperation within the cockpit. Delta also changed. It reinforced its operational standards, retrained its staff, and modified its internal policies. The accident left a deep mark on the company, not only because of the human loss, but also because of what it revealed, that even a prestigious airline can fall into the trap of complacency. Meanwhile, the victims' families faced a quieter struggle. Some sued the airline. Others dedicated themselves to promoting air safety. Some never flew again. The pain of losing a loved one in an accident that should never have happened doesn't go away. It transforms, but it never disappears. Today, the case of Delta 1141 is studied in aviation academies around the world. Not because of the complexity of the accident, but quite the opposite, because of how simple it was to prevent. It is a painful example of how routine can become dangerous when we stop respecting procedures. And also proof that aviation, no matter how much technology it has, still depends on the human factor. Air safety has advanced. Past mistakes become lessons for the future. But those lessons must not be forgotten, because every ignored checklist, every inactive alarm, every out-of-place conversation in the cockpit can be the beginning of a new tragedy. Delta Flight 1141 should never have taken off, and although 94 people survived, 14 did not. For them, and for all those who board a plane hoping to get home, these stories must keep being told, so that no plane ever falls again because of something so easy to prevent